It is so wonderful to be here, man. Chad fires me up every time. That guy's amazing. Look, I'm the last speaker standing between you guys and dinner and a good night's sleep, and then this 36 hours we're all going to do battle with on this mountain. But I gotta ask you, this point in the day, who's feeling a little bit nervous? A little bit nervous? Yeah. That's completely normal. I want to talk about that real quick and then share a few stories from my experience climbing Mount Everest. But that nervousness that we feel, I think oftentimes we confuse that feeling with stress, right? We know that feeling of stress. You know, it's you get a late email from your boss at work that says, hey, you have to do this, and you're like, oh man, or you're running behind, you're running late for a meeting, or something goes wrong with your kids, and you're like, oh, I'm stressed, I gotta get through this. But this nervousness that you feel can be equated to that, because sometimes it feels very similar in our body. But I want to remind you of something. You know, when your boss sends you that email and you got to stay up late working through the night, you have to do that. You have to do that to keep your job, right? But this nervous feeling, this challenge that we've all signed up for, you get to do this. You get to do this. There may be 1% of you right now that's asking yourself, well, why did I sign up for this? What am I doing here? You know, maybe this isn't for me. But at some point, and hopefully still right now, you realize, I want to go climb a mountain. I want to test myself. I want to find out what is inside of my body. I want to reach the summit of Mount Everest here at Snow Basin, Utah. Now, who signed up for this event almost 2 years ago? I know there's a lot of people here. Yeah, I'm going to give you guys a round of applause. Obviously, we've had a tough year in this world. Our events were canceled last year. But there are people that signed up in October of 2019 who have stuck this out this entire time. Who have committed not just to being here in this moment, but committed to this goal and kept training for it and kept focused on it for the last 2 years. One of the things that I want to talk about really is that 29029 is not just an event, but 29029 is a community. A community of like-minded people who think that climbing a mountain 13 times in a row sounds like a good idea. So when Jesse, myself, and Mark, when we co-founded this event, that was actually at the heart of it. It wasn't, could we climb this mountain? It was like, hey, if we put this challenge out in the world, who will show up? Will it be nobody? But if people do show up, we're going to be in a room full of our kind of people. Like-minded people. So right now, on day one, Thursday, before we start this event, you might feel like you're sitting in a room full of strangers, unfamiliar faces, people you haven't seen before. But I can promise you this, by the end of this weekend, you are going to be sitting in a room full of friends, a room full of family. If you look to your right or you look to your left, you might not know this person or their name yet, but I promise you, they are just like you. You are cut from the same cloth as them, which is why this isn't work for any of us putting on this event. This is our dream, to be in a room full of our kind of people, crazy enough to stay up through the middle of the night and challenge themselves and see what they are made of. And I'm so grateful and honored to be here sharing this space and this community with all of you. So, as some of you might know, I've been fortunate in my life to go after climbing the real Mount Everest. I'm going to tell you a few stories from that because I think it's pertinent to the journey that we're going through together on this mountain here. You know, when I was a little kid, it was just a dream of mine. I was obsessed with Everest. You know, I read every single book, you know, the disasters, the curiosity of, you know, how high is it, how far is it, you know, how cold is it, all this kind of stuff. And it was just a dream for me that I kind of put out there. But I never thought it was really possible for me. And in a strange way, one of the worst moments of my life actually led to me believing that I could do it. When I was 22 years old, I was traveling around the world just not after I graduated from college, not long after. And I found myself on a beach in rural Thailand, and there was a couple guys jumping a flaming jump rope. And to my 22-year-old self, you know, not a fully formed prefrontal cortex at that point, I was like, gee, that looks like fun. And it was fun for a little while. Right until the rope wrapped around my legs and lit my body on fire completely to my neck. Survival mode kicked in when I needed it most, and I jumped into the ocean to extinguish the flames, which saved my life, but not before about 25% of my body was severely burned. And I was in the middle of nowhere in Thailand. I actually had a moped ride down a dirt path instead of an ambulance ride. I was in a one-room nursing station where I underwent 8 surgeries, where there was a cat running across my chest and around my bed in this makeshift ICU. And the physical pain was immense. There was literally skin hanging off my legs, deep 2nd and 3rd degree burns. But the worst part about it was when a doctor walked in, and through his accented Thai English, he looks me straight in the eyes. He says, "Colin, you're never going to walk again normally." And I thought the physical pain was immense, but the emotional pain was such a deep downward spiral. But fortunately, in this moment, there is a heroine to this story, which is my incredible mother. She took her 5 days to find me, to fly to rural Thailand, to find me out on these small islands in the Gulf of Thailand, but she finally found me in this tiny little hospital, and I was downward spiraling fast. I thought my life was completely over as I knew it. And she sits on my hospital bed one day and she says, "Colin, this is a bad moment. This is probably the worst moment of your life so far. But do me a favor. Close your eyes. Visualize a positive outcome in the future. Set a goal. What do you see yourself doing?" I didn't want to play along with her silly game, but finally she convinced me. And I closed my eyes and I started smiling. And she says, "What do you see?" And I say, "I see myself crossing the finish line of a triathlon one day." Not something I'd ever done before in my life, but maybe that was just what came to me, what I needed in this moment. Let's set a goal. And every single person in this room, to be in this room, whether it was 2 years ago, 1 year ago, you set yourself a goal. You set your sights on something that seemed unattainable. Now, my mom could easily have said to me, she said, "I said set a goal, but like your legs, and the doctor says you're never going to walk again normally, maybe something more realistic." Has anybody had a friend, a neighbor, a colleague, when you've talked about climbing 2920 say, "What? What are you going to do? That sounds unrealistic. That's not possible, right?" Yes. I know we've all had that experience. But my mom didn't say that to me. She said, "Great, let's start training right now." It was a couple months that I was in that Thai hospital. I was carried on and off the plane when I flew back to Portland, Oregon, where I'm from. I was placed in a wheelchair when I got home. I hadn't taken a single step, still bandaged from the waist down. And that first day that I got home, my mother, she grabs a wooden chair from our kitchen table and she places it one step in front of my wheelchair. And she says, "Now I know you've got this big triathlon goal, but today your goal is to take your very first step." She said, "You need to figure out how to get out of that wheelchair and take one step to that wooden chair in front of you." It took me 3 hours that day sitting in that wheelchair, staring at this chair in front of me, but I finally worked up the courage and strength to stand on my bandaged legs and feet and take that first step in the chair in front of me. I had taken my first step. But my mom didn't take it easy on me. The next day she moved the chair 5 steps away, the next 10 steps away. Each day I could take a few more steps on this journey, on this road to recovery. And I didn't know how I was going to get to this triathlon goal. Chad talked about it before. When you're on lap 1, forget about lap 10. Just put it out of your mind. Lap 10 will take care of itself when you're on lap 10. It's about getting to that next chair. It's about getting to that next step along your journey. And for the next 18 months, I just focused on getting a few more steps in every single day until I found myself at the start line of the Chicago Triathlon. I dove in, I started that race, I swam in Lake Michigan, rode my bike down Lakeshore Drive, and I finally crossed the Chicago Triathlon. I had done it. I had proven the doctor wrong, but more importantly, I had proven myself that I could rebuild myself and achieve this audacious goal that I had set for myself. And there was one surprise in store for me that day, which is I hadn't actually just finished the race, but I actually won the entire Chicago Triathlon, placing first out of nearly 4,000 other participants on the day. But it wasn't that I wasn't proud of that fact, but what I was proud of was this moment. What I kept thinking back on was this sliding door moment in this hospital. What would have happened had my mom not forced me to look towards the future and set this measurable goal? What would have happened? And what I realized is that all of us, not just me, I'm not some superhuman ability or anything like that. I am just like every single person in this room, every single person in this 29 on 29 community. We all have reservoirs of untapped potential inside of us to achieve extraordinary things. Particularly when we shift our mindset towards the positive in the face of adversity. When we take quitting off the table, like Chad said. When we believe that we can take one step further along the way. And so after this moment, I was kind of built up by this excitement of what I'd learned through this. Sometimes we learn the most about ourselves through adversity. Now, there's not going to be any, reckless burn accidents or fire jump roping out here. I promise you that. That's not the safety standards of our event here. But you are going to face adversity out there. But it's a gift. It is a gift. It's a gift you've given yourself by sitting yourself in this room, by being a part of this community, by saying, you know what? When I challenge myself, when I prove to myself that I can do hard things, I'm going to come back stronger. And with that renewed strength coming off the burn accident, the Chicago Triathlon, I said, what do I want to do next? I became a professional triathlete. I raced in 25 countries on 6 different continents over 5 or 6 years for the U.S. national team. And then that little boy inside of me started speaking up again. I want to climb Mount Everest. It was a dream when I was a little kid, but all of a sudden my experience said, maybe this is possible. And so my wife Jenna and I, we started thinking, Googling, how do you do that? How far away is it? This. And we decided for me to set this world record goal, which is to do something called the Explorers Grand Slam. So that includes climbing Everest, but it's to climb the 7 summits, the names that are on the back of all of your jerseys, the tallest mountain on each of the 7 continents, as well as complete expeditions to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Now, fewer than 50 people in history have ever completed this Explorers Grand Slam, but I was going to aim to not just complete it, but be the fastest to complete it. So not taking any breaks between, just going from back to back to back to back, each mountain back to back. Very similar to what you guys are going to be doing, as you brand up the board, back to back to back to back to back. And so we had no idea how we were going to get there, no idea how we were going to raise the money and all this sort of stuff, but after a couple years of planning and dreaming, it was finally time for me to depart on this expedition. I started at the South Pole, I trekked to the South Pole, and I climbed the tallest mountain in Antarctica, Mount Vincent, Aconcagua in South America, Kilimanjaro, etc., back to back to back, till I found myself 100 days in this journey at the base of Mount Everest. I just had one other mountain other than that to climb, which was Denali, to complete the Grand Slam. But I stood at the base of Mount Everest, and I looked up to the summit, and it just felt unfathomably far. I mean, looking up at the tallest mountain in the world. Now, has anybody here, maybe when you drove up the road in the parking lot, looked up a disc course and kind of had that same feeling? Yeah, a little bit? Yeah. So you can only imagine what was going through me. I said, wow, this is amazing to be here, but can a human really walk up that far? Now, most of you probably know this, but on Mount Everest, you have to do what's called acclimatizing. So you have to climb slowly from camp to camp through the mountain. You have base camp, camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, camp 4, and then you go for the summit. On that expedition, I was climbing with a Sherpa by the name of Pasang Bodhi, a friend of mine, just the 2 of us climbing. And we progress our way through the camps as fast as we can, getting our body used to the thinner and thinner air. We finally get to camp 4, which is also known as the death zone, 26,000 feet. The human body cannot survive for long above that. We're getting ready to climb to the summit that night, and all of a sudden, a massive storm blows in. 50, 60 mile per hour winds, our tent is rattling, we're afraid the tent poles are going to break, and we realize there's no way we're going to be able to go for the summit. We're going to be lucky to survive this night in the death zone and retreat down the mountain with our lives. It was a disappointing moment, but we had no choice, and so we climbed back down the mountain. And I had a satellite phone with me, as my friends and families, had the number to. And I started getting all these text messages, which were to say, we're so proud of you. You did such a great job. You did, 7 of the 9 expeditions for the Explorers Grand Slam. You made it almost to the summit of Mount Everest. You should be super proud of yourself. And not that I didn't appreciate those words, but I didn't feel like I was done. And you've heard how we define success at this event. We talk about the red hat, we talk about the 13 laps, we talk about Mount Everest. But what we're really talking about, what success really looks like, is leaving it all out there. It's emptying the tank. It's continuing to push when it gets hard. I hope every single person here walks away with a red hat and Mount Everest, but that's not the point. Success looks like emptying your full tank, staying out there as long as you can. And I, in this moment, didn't feel like I had fully emptied my tank. And so exhausted as I was, I looked for another weather window about a week later and took all my energy and courage to climb back up to Camp 4. And again, as we're getting ready to go for the summit, I get on my radio, I call back to base camp to get the final weather forecast, and they say, hey, we've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is this weather might hold. But the bad news is it's actually the identical forecast a week ago when you were up here, And if that same kind of storm blows in, and you're higher on the mountain, there's no telling what big of a disaster that could be. So all of a sudden, I was completely afraid. Doing the only thing I could think of, I grabbed my satellite phone and I called home to my wife, Jenna, who had been monitoring, doing all the logistics back home, a bunch of nonprofit stuff with kids, and she was facilitating all of that. And she said, "What's up?" And I explained the situation to her. I said, "Look, I'm afraid, I'm not sure I should go." She goes, "Do me a favor. Go inside your body and listen. Listen, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath." She said, "You've trained for this. You're ready. People are going to summit Mount Everest tonight, and there is no reason you can't be one of them. People are going to summit Mount Everest tonight, and there's no reason you can't be one of them." It's definitely the pep talk I needed to get back out of this tent, but it's something I want to reflect back onto everyone here. People are going to summit this Mount Everest over the next 36 hours, and there is absolutely no reason that every single person in this room cannot be one of them. So with that courage and that strength that she instilled with me on our satellite phone all the way back home, I climbed to the summit of Everest. I reached my boyhood dream. It was a beautiful moment standing out on the top of the world. And then I climbed back down completely exhausted. It takes me an hour to unzip my boots, and I slide into my tent at Camp 4. I'm still at 26,000 feet. I'm way high on the mountain. It's going to take me several days to descend. And I pick up my satellite phone again, and I call home to my wife, Jenna. She answers. She's like, "How you doing?" I said, "I did it. I summited Mount Everest, only one more mountain to go once I rest up." She goes, "How are you doing? No frostbite, no injuries?" No frostbite, no injuries. I'm exhausted. I tell her how long it's taken me to take my boots off. She then says something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. She says, "Well, if you're okay, in that case, I need you to put your boots back on." I'm like, "Excuse me?" This crackly sat phone communication. I think you just said, "What?" She goes, Yeah. I've been doing some calculating back home, and if you can get to the summit of Denali in the next week, you can set not one, but 2 world records." I'm like, "What?" She's like, Yeah. Now there's a quote that I live by, that I've lived by for a long time. It's a Henry Ford quote that says, "He who says he can, and he who says he can't, are both usually right." Now, I had no idea if I could do what Jenna was asking, but I knew I could at least put the boots back on. So I said, so what's the plan? She goes, "Okay, put your boots back on right now. Climb all the way back down to base camp. There's not enough time, but I've arranged for a helicopter to take you to Kathmandu. Now, there's not enough time for you to shower or stay overnight in a hotel, but an evening flight will take you from Dubai to Seattle, Seattle to Anchorage, and then instead of having 3 weeks to climb Denali, you'll have 3 days. But 2 world records, right?" Now, it was 120 days when I was back at the South Pole, so it's not just Everest. This is 8 expeditions stacking up. But again, that Henry Ford quote, "He who says he can, he who says he can't." I could put my boots on, and sure enough, just 100 hours after standing on the summit of Mount Everest, I arrived at the base of Denali, the final mountain of the 7 Summits Explorers Grand Slam expedition. Now, I could give you a whole other, speech on just that last 3 days on Denali, battling intense storms, battling intense exhaustion. But sure enough, we pulled off Jenna's plan. 3 days later, I stood on the summit of Denali, setting not 1, but 2 world records for the Explorers Grand Slam and the 7 Summits. Now, it was a beautiful and certainly proud moment in my life, a moment where my mind went all the way back to that Thai hospital, wondering again what would have happened had my mom not set me on this course and told me to set that goal. It was a proud moment thinking, dreaming this little kid, oh, could I climb this mountain one day, and not thinking it was really possible, but having done it. But now, this is a warning for every person in this room, because once you do something like that, you might think, great, now I can just kick my feet up. But what you'll find after you summit this Mount Everest is you're going to start asking yourself, what is my next Mount Everest? Now, I'm sure there's some spouses of all of you, or colleagues, or friends that have said, great. It's a crazy thing. Once you're done with this, we're back to our regularly scheduled programming, not so much training. But my warning to you is this, is that is an unlikely thing to happen. What is much more likely is after you prove to yourself that you can do hard things like this, you're going to want more of it. You're going to crave even bigger challenges. You are going to, take on the world with this depth of experience of what you are really made of. And that is the lesson that I know all of you are going to take out of this experience. So like Chad said, it's already done. That is already predestined. 36 hours from now, you are going to be a stronger, more accomplished, more capable version of yourself. And I'm so proud to see that transformation. But it was no difference for me coming off of Everest. I said, well, what's my next Everest? And so I set my sights on becoming the first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported, and completely human-powered. And that's a 1,000-mile journey, pulling a 375-pound sled. It's so heavy because unsupported means no resupplies of food or fuel along the way. I took a year or so to plan for this. People had attempted this before me. Unfortunately, someone passed away attempting the same crossing. People started to say, this crossing, it's not possible. So many people had tried it. I didn't know if it was possible either, but I believe when we test ourselves with hard challenges, succeed or fail, there's no fail. Succeed means trying. Succeed means, again, emptying the tank. Succeed means going as hard as you possibly can go to the finish line or until you can't go any further. And so Jenna and I, we branded our project and we called it The Impossible First. So a tiny little bush plane, it flew me out there to drop me off on the edge of the frozen continent. And it just so happened that the day I was flying out there, it turned out there was another British explorer who was going to be attempting the same crossing on the exact same day as me. I thought I was just racing history, but there's only one guy who can fly the plane out there. There's only one season, so we both called up the same guy and said, hey, can I get a flight to the end of Antarctica? And now I'm sitting shoulder to shoulder on a cargo plane with a guy like, yo, bro, we're going to race each other for 1,000 miles? Like, this is ridiculous. And he's a grizzled polar veteran, one of the most accomplished in the world, and I'd be lying to say if I wasn't intimidated. He looks over at me and goes, there's a long storied history of British attempting this. It'll be a Brit who cracks this first. Okay. So we decided to get dropped off 1 mile equidistant from each other, but equidistant to the starting waypoint, the GPS coordinate that we were going towards, just because it was so weird to stand right next to each other. So that happens. The plane drops me off. The pilot helps me unload this 375-pound sled. I set it on the ground, and I pull out my GoPro, and I figure, I should say something to mark this moment, like, in the history books, Ernest Shackleton from 100 years ago exploring Antarctica, a hero of mine. So I try to say something profound, like, this marks the beginning, something silly of this first journey across Antarctica solo. Then I strap on a harness. It's like a backpack that's attached to my sled. And I'm like, all right, here we go. And here's what happens. It's like this. All right, let's go. Okay, it's deep snow. It's fine. It's fine. I pull the sled 2 feet. 2 feet. I have a 1,000-mile journey in front of me, and I pull the sled 2 feet. And I'm like, okay, this can't be this. So let me try this one more time. It's like, kind of try to rock it, get some momentum. 5 feet. And I stop. It pulls me back. Like a dog getting pulled back on a leash. Then what happens? I start sobbing. I start uncontrollably crying. Now, I love the 29 on 29 community so much that right before I left, we had our Vermont event in 2018, and I had an embargoed press story with the Today Show, the New York Times. They're about to launch this, but I hadn't told anyone about it publicly. But like I said, sitting in a room full of my people, I was like, these people are going to get this. And so this community of 29 on 29 was the first people that I shared this with. But then I did also share this with the world, the New York Times, the Today Show, millions of people. And gosh, when I couldn't pull my sled, I sure regretted that decision. I was like, wow, this is going to be the all-time biggest embarrassing, most thing ever. And like I said, I'm sobbing out there. I'm all alone in Antarctica. I've gone 2 feet. I'm sobbing out there. What happens when you start crying in Antarctica and it's minus 25 degrees outside? Well, it just so happens that the tears, they freeze to your face. So if I already felt bad about myself, that is pretty much the worst feeling ever. I'm like, okay, this can't get any worse. Captain Lou's a mile up to my right. He must be struggling too to get this started. I look over to the right, and he's just a full military man in Mars. No problem, no issue, gone, disappeared across the horizon. So again, you probably see a theme here, but I reach for my satellite phone, and I call home to Jenna. And she says, why are you calling me? Didn't you just get dropped off? She obviously knows my whereabouts. I can see you on the GPS. You're like right by where you started. So I said, well, babe, turns out I think we named our project the right thing. This is for sure impossible. She then says, okay, how far away are you from the first waypoint? I look down and I go, 0.53 miles. It's a half a mile. She goes, you have 1,000 miles to go, but forget about that. 0.53 miles. She goes, do me a favor. Get yourself to the next waypoint, to the first waypoint of this. She goes, forget about Lou. Forget about this race. Forget about the 1,000 more miles you have to do. Get to the first waypoint. Now that was very sound advice, and advice that I want to pass on to everyone here, because 1,000 miles is too abstract. 13 laps of this mountain is too abstract. But what I do know that you can do is get to the next waypoint. Get to the next aid station. Get to the next aid station after that. You look at, you're walking along the gondola. Get to the one pole further. One pole further. So I do that. I get to the first waypoint. I set up my tent. I get inside. I'm feeling pretty defeated, but I guess I'll go to sleep. Maybe I'll feel better in the morning. I wake up. My alarm clock goes off at 5 a.m. Start the day nice and fresh. What happens? All of a sudden, I'm doing battle with the biggest demon that any of us has. Our own self-doubt. Our own mind. It's in there in the tent with me, talking to me. Colin, you're such an idiot. How embarrassing. You're such a fool for thinking you could do this. You're so weak. You are so weak. Are you kidding me? 375-pound sled? You didn't train enough. You're not strong. I think we can all relate to that feeling, beating ourselves up, and that's exactly what I was doing. One thing I believe is that we are the stories that we tell ourselves. We're the stories that we tell ourselves. I actually have control in that moment to take over my own thoughts. And so I've never done this before. I'm big on mantras and I'm big on positive self-talk, but I needed an extra dose of it that day in Antarctica. And so actually out loud, to the endless Antarctic abyss, I start shouting out loud to myself, Colin, you are strong, you are capable. You are strong, you are capable. You are strong, you are capable. And every single day when I woke up crossing that ice, I would say that, I would shout it out loud to override that negative voice. And that's something we all have the power to do in this room, where the stories we tell ourselves. There might be a gondola ride. There might be a lap up this mountain. There might be a segment of one of these days where you get into that negative loop. You get to override that. Start telling yourself that positive story, because that is what carried me across Antarctica. I caught up to Lou on the 6th day. I passed him, and 54 days later, I crossed first, and becoming the very first person in history to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported, and completely human-powered. Now, that of course was a very proud moment for me. And I came home not long after that. I've done some other project. I rowed a boat across Drake Passage to reach Antarctica. I attempted to be the first person to climb K2 in winter. But somewhere in there, in the spring of 2019, my wife Jenna, she looks over at me and she goes, hey, do you think I could climb Mount Everest one day? And I perked up. Not because Fred didn't think she could do it, then she would be the first one to admit this if she were here, which is, she doesn't identify herself as endurance athlete, mountaineer. I've seen her do extraordinary things, but that's just not her core identity of how she identifies herself. And so when she said this, I was kind of taken aback, and I said, absolutely. I believe you can climb Mount Everest. Of course, we're going to have to do some training. I'm going to teach you how to do some technical mountaineering skills, ice axe, crampons, etc. But of course, you can do this. And so from the spring of 2019, all the way through that year, she trained relentlessly. She dug in, she done all the training, she was reading all the books, asking me a million questions, all this. She was super fired up about it. And she said, you know, Colin, you've climbed from Nepal, but not everyone knows this, but the summit of Mount Everest is actually on the border between China and Nepal. And she said, why don't we climb from the Chinese side? It's a new side for you. And that route looked more appealing to me. I don't have to go through this thing called the Khumbu Ice Fall, which is this big glacier, moving glacier that a lot of people die in on Mount Everest. I said, wow, that sounds amazing. I'm so proud of all your training. We've got our bags all packed up. We're ready to go. And then our flight to China, April 4th, 2020. Not a great time to go to China, it turns out. Just a little thing kind of bubbling up in Wuhan right around that time. We all know the story from there. Just like everything else in everyone else's lives, of course, our expedition was canceled. COVID. And in the grand scheme of things, let's be honest, an expedition being canceled is now the smallest issue that this planet has faced, and we can certainly accept that, but it was disappointing to say that, nonetheless. And again, this is somewhat of a vulnerable share, but Jenna's okay with me sharing this, which is, after that moment, she gave up. She gave up. She stopped training. Just ambition to climb Mount Everest completely waned. I was disappointed. I think she was disappointed in herself. But I think we've all gone through this year, right? It's been tough. There's been moments of like, just life isn't the same. How do I find my bearings? How do I find my routine? What's going on? And she gave up. And I applaud each and every one of you that have stuck with it for 2 years. Those that signed up in 2019 that are still here, that still committed to this goal. But unfortunately for Jenna, that wasn't the case. So a year rolls around, and this spring, which was just a few months ago, Mount Everest season's coming back. China's still closed, but we put this money down as a deposit and realized we could still go on the Nepalese side. So I said, hey, I think I'm still going to go. She said, that's great. I always support you. You should 100% do this. I said, I'm going to try to climb without supplemental oxygen. Only about 1% of Mount Everest ascents happen without a supplemental oxygen support. So I always wanted to try that out. So I set my sights on that, and Jenna said, okay, I support you. She goes, how about, actually, why don't I come to base camp with you? I could come on the trek. It's a 10-day trek, and I'm not going to climb Everest, but at least I could see it, and that'd be super cool. We could spend some time together. I said, wow, that'd be awesome. That'd be great. So we fly over there in April of this past year, just a few months ago, and we do this 10-day trek together. It's amazing. We arrive at the base of Mount Everest, beautiful, looking up at it, reminding me of the last time I was there 5 years earlier. And Jenna looks at me. We're staring at the Khumbu Ice Fall now, the place that she's been afraid to climb. Understandably so. It's a very dangerous part of the mountain. It's the first part as you leave base camp. She goes, hey, I know you're getting ready to go to Camp 2 for your acclimatization. Do you think I could climb up to Camp 2 with you? And I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be awesome. And we could at least climb part of Mount Everest together. Not our full goal, but that'd be awesome. So we get her all the gear organized, and we climb all the way through the Khumbu Ice Fall, and we reach Camp 2. It's amazing to share this experience with her. But I need to climb all the way up to Camp 4, to sleep at Camp 4 for a few nights, to get my body ready for this non-supplemental oxygen attempt. And so I said, hey, she knew this. I said, I got to leave you in Camp 2 for a few days. Do you feel right? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. So I climb up to Camp 4. I spend a few nights on the mountain. I come back down. Now, usually, she's at 21,000 feet. Being at 21,000 feet is usually pretty rough. People, headaches, can't sleep, no appetite. It's a really rough thing. So I'm pretty worried about her. She's never been this high before. And I come back down to Camp 2, and I'm she's in this tent by herself. Are you all right? She's like, yeah, I'm great. Why do you ask? Just been sitting here, taking in these beautiful views. She's in great mood. Everything's good. I'm wow, that's a rare thing to happen on Mount Everest at Camp 2. And she has this kind of glint in her eye. She looks up and she goes, do you think I could climb Mount Everest one day? Same exact question she asked me 2 years previous. And I pause for a second and I say, people are going to summit Mount Everest this season. There's no reason you can't be one of them. She laughs, of course. She remembers this, all this. She goes, no, not this year. I'm just joking. I don't have the permit and all this kind of stuff. So we kind of leave it at that, and we climb back down to base camp. We're getting ready for my summit push, and all of a sudden a massive storm blows in and delays us for 3 weeks. We're sitting in base camp just waiting for good weather for 3 weeks. And that glint in her eye just never goes away. And a couple weeks into this storm, she keeps looking up, and she goes, you said up there that this season, do you think there's any way that I could climb Mount Everest this season? She's like, I didn't really train. She's like, but. And I said, 100% I believe in you. I don't know if we can pull off the red tape and the paperwork. You usually applied for your permit about a year ago. You don't have a permit. I do know a guy at the Ministry of Tourism. Let me see if I can call in a favor. On May 25th of this year, Jenna got issued usually the season's over by May 25th, and she got issued the last permit to climb Mount Everest, the latest of all time. And then on May 26th, we set up from base camp and we go to Camp 2 again. We get there, the place she's been before. We're going to bed that night. Next night's for Camp 3, and all of a sudden a massive rumbling comes in the night. All of a sudden we just hear this rumbling. We wake up, I'm startled. All of our tent poles are breaking. Oh my God, it's an avalanche, an avalanche. An avalanche is powering down on our tent. Jen and I are actually sleeping head to toe because it's a small tent. Her head is actually buried underneath the snow side of this avalanche. So I have to reach down and grab her out, unzip the front of our tent as this avalanche is sweeping across us on Camp 2. One of the scariest moments of my life by far. Obviously, we're both very shaken up by this when the sunrise comes up the following morning. And so I look at her and I was like, okay, the writing's on the wall, we tried this. We should probably pack up. And she's like, yeah, we should pack up. She goes, Camp 2 sucks. I don't want to spend another night here. I don't want to spend another night here. She's like, yeah, so let's get the backpacks and let's keep going. Camp 3, right? Yeah. I was like, what? She didn't want to give up at that point. So we go to Camp 3. We go to Camp 4. Now from Camp 4, the only way to reach the summit is to climb through the entirety of the night. We've been mentioned a few times on the stage already, but climbing and hiking at night is a very, very special thing, so I encourage every single person to take advantage of it this weekend. We climbed through that night, and all of a sudden we reached something called the South Summit, and the sunrise is coming up, the most beautiful sunrise. I actually just posted a video of this on my Instagram the other day, and that's our red bib moment. We can see the final top of Mount Everest. It's just a final ridge from there. We're so excited. And we reach the summit of Mount Everest together. Now, I mentioned before, I've set these other world records, 10 world records, these world firsts, etc. And yes, I'm very proud of that. I am. And Jen and I standing on the summit of Mount Everest was no record of any kind. It wasn't a record. But it is by far my favorite moment, perhaps in my life, but definitely from all of my expeditions. Why? Why does it stand out? Because I was with my family. I was with my person. And that is what we are cultivating here. We are cultivating family. We are cultivating deep friendship that can only be built through shared experiences with depth. That is what this community really stands for. So to share that with her was incredible. So I carry these 2 rocks in my pocket. This one here is from my first ever summit. It's from the very summit of Mount Everest. I carry this rock, and I've done so for 5 years, as a daily reminder that even Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world, or Mount Everest here in Utah, can be broken down to its smallest parts. A bunch of small rocks stacked on top of each other, many steps leading to the summit. And I've cherished this in my pocket, and I keep it with me. But I have a second one now that definitely means even more to me. This is from Jenna and my summit. And to me, this rock represents the power of love, the power of vision, the power of friendship, the power of family, ultimately, the power of community. The power of community. That's what this one stands for me. Shared experiences. We all have given ourselves a gift by sitting in this room. You are going to remember this experience for the rest of your life. As our dear friend Jesse likes to say, we are adding to our life resume. Now, you kind of know that here at 29 on 29, we love to swag you out. You go into your tent, you got the hoodies, you got the hats, and even if that's not enough swag for you, you can buy extras, whatever. But there is one thing that you cannot buy here at 29 on 29, which is this. It's the red hat. You could offer us $1 million. You could come up here with a bag full of money, and trust me, I could use that $1 million in my life. I don't usually say no to money. But you cannot buy this red hat. This red hat can only be earned. This red hat can only be earned by you on this mountain, giving it your best, brand after brand. 36 hours from now, really 24 hours from now, you'll see the first people reach the summit of Mount Everest in this challenge. And you'll start seeing people walk around here at the base wearing red hats. I can assure you that every single person that you see in our awards ceremony on Saturday night when we celebrate all of our collective success together, every red hat in that room has been earned. Has been earned. Not bought, it's been earned by you. By you believing in yourself. People are going to summit Mount Everest here, and there is no reason you can't be one of them wearing a red hat. As we say, this is not a race, this is you versus you. But here's the beautiful thing. You're not out there alone. It's you versus you, but you are uplifted by the strength of this community. The strength of this community. It's impossible to go through this challenge without having about 50 sweaty hugs, 100 backpacks, high fives, gondola rides with interesting people. Lean into this. You're in a room full of like-minded people for once that want to earn something like this by walking up this hill. Now, throughout this challenge, just to conclude, throughout this challenge, there will become times when you get tired. There will become times when you want to go, inside, and get a little massage and put the Normatec boots on, etc. And that's fine. That's fine. But the only way, when you're that tired, you're sitting there getting massaged and you're thinking, you know what, maybe I'm good, that you're going to earn this red hat, is if you put your boots back on and you get back out on the hill. You get back out on the hill by putting your boots back on. And when it gets tough out there, remember, you're the story you tell yourself. You are strong, you are capable, you are strong, you are capable, but we, collectively, this community, we are unstoppable. We are going to climb this Mount Everest together. I know each and every one of you is going to leave it all out there and earn that red hat. I can't wait to hike these hills with you. I'm so proud of each and every one of you.
Our plan, Colin O'Brady. Thank you, Colin.